Thank you all for being here today. Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing as we recite the four-way test of the things we think, say, or do. First, is it the truth? Second, is it fair to all concerned? Third, will it build goodwill and better friendships? Fourth, will it be beneficial to all concerned? I invite Jesse up now for our invocation.
Thank you, President Cindy. Please join me in prayer. Lord Creator, you call us to love our neighbors as ourselves. As we go about this Christmas and holiday season, may your love guide us. May you work to bring good tidings to our neighbors and help those in need. Lord Creator, thank you for the countless hands that helped make our meal possible today. Be with our producers this week as they work through challenging weather. Throughout this holiday season, may your presence be felt by those that need it most. In your name we pray, amen.
Before we move into Rotary business, I do have a piece of news that I would like to share with everyone. If you have not heard, our dear friend and downtown Rotarian Scott Lawrence lost his daughter this weekend. And so if you can keep him in your thoughts and prayers, no doubt, especially during the holiday season, he would feel those and welcome them very much. We have a guest today, and Heather is going to introduce our guest. If there is a microphone to come your way, I don't think there is, that's my bad. So, Jennifer's got it. Oh, I didn't tell anybody. I just knew in my head we were doing it and I forgot to tell anybody. Heather, you have a guest.
I do. President Cindy and fellow Rotarians, please help me in welcoming Braden Medrano. He works alongside me at the Boys and Girls Club of the Sioux Empire and does an outstanding job leading our community youth center, which is housed in downtown Sioux Falls in the Y, working alongside and with kids from our middle schools and high schools. So help me welcome him.
Thank you. We have two roaming Rotarians, Dwayne Walk and Lauren Boyens. Thank you both for being here representing Sioux Falls Rotary West. A reminder of our Spirit of Rotary holiday opportunities in the coming days. I want to thank all of the downtown Rotarians who have already RSVP'd to participate in the Spirit of Rotary holiday celebration. That's going to be next Monday, December 19th. It is a Rotary meeting with spirits and music. It's also an opportunity to invite your spouse into downtown Rotary as a guest. Augustana Blues and Jazz Combo will start playing at 11:30, and we will keep with the spirit and music theme with the National Music Museum Executive Director, Dwight Vaught, and a board member to be here and tell the story of this organization and its worldwide impact. It is a plated meal, so RSVPing is really important. We already have well over 80 signed up. You have until the end of today to RSVP, right? We want to keep Angie happy. So end of today, you can either tell Angie before you leave, or you can use the link that was provided in today's Monday email. So please join us next Monday. As you can see in front of me, the stack is growing and I love it. Next week is our last opportunity to bring new packages of warm winter socks for the guests of Bishop Dudley House. We'll be delivering them to the house in time for Christmas. And I love that it's already overflowing. So let's see if we can keep the stacking. Thank you to all who have already done so. We also have a volunteer opportunity, again, keeping in the spirit of the holiday. Sunday, Downtown Rotary is staffing the Children's in gift wrapping booth at the Empire Mall. So fun fact 227 about Cindy Peterson, I love to wrap presents. And I don't want that to deter anyone from signing up, but I am personally very excited to spend Sunday evening at the mall. We will be staffing the booth from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. We've got shifts from 4 to 5:30, 5:30 to 7. There's room for 2 or 3 more in each of our sessions. And so I hope that's something you think about doing. And guess what? Angie, again, is your point of contact for signing up, or you can call her or email her. But let's really show that festive love. No doubt the mall will be very busy Sunday afternoon and evening. Today is the last chance for you to purchase raffle tickets for the Rotary West fundraiser. That is for the Boys and Girls Club. And you know where Dwayne Walk is, especially if he waves for us. If you're interested, Dwayne's your guy. So glad to have you there. Thanks for supporting all that. Again, one of my most favorite things to do is new member induction, and we have yet another new member to bring into Downtown Rotary. I'd like to invite Dr. Tim Ridgway to introduce our newest Rotarian.
Thank you, everyone. I serve as the Vice President for Health Affairs and Dean of the University of South Dakota Sanford School of Medicine. No doubt that every one of you are aware of the substantial shortage in healthcare workers we're facing, not only in South Dakota, but throughout the nation. It's my pleasure to introduce our newest Rotarian, Dr. Haifa Abu Samra. Dr. Samra is Dean of our Health Sciences program at USD, and her mission is workforce. It's about training the people, the support staff that provide the health care for us and our families. And she's doing a wonderful job of it, and I think will be an excellent addition to Rotary. Without further ado, Dr. Samra.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Dean Ridgway, for the kind introduction and for the sponsorship. And thank you, Rotary, for accepting my application. I was raised and born in Lebanon in the Middle East. As you see, I have an accent. So I'm first generation immigrant. I lived and worked in so many places, including Saudi Arabia and Dhahran and Jeddah with the American Oil Company. I also worked on the West Coast in Reno, Nevada, with St. Mary's Health Network, with Kaiser Permanente, and I worked here at SDSU, at Sanford, Avera. So I've been around the block for quite some time, without disclosing my age. And I've been with USD in the Dean's position since June 2019, just a little bit before COVID hit. So that was a little bit about my background and what I do. In my Dean's position with USD, as Dean Ridgway said, I do oversee the health sciences programs. We enroll over 2,000 students. We have 9 departments, and that includes addiction counseling and prevention, dental hygiene, nursing, health sciences, physician assistant studies, occupational therapy, physical therapy, medical lab science. The list goes on and on. Hopefully, most of the times I forget, I have to count them on my fingers because there is so many of them. We have 26 programs between undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs. We do serve South Dakota. Service is our mission, and we do serve South Dakota in 3 ways. One way is through education and training of the workforce, and that's through programs. My responsibility is to ensure our programs are relevant to the need of the employers in the state and to the emerging also trends and needs nationwide, and to ensure quality and rigorous programming. We also serve the state through research. For example, this last year we were able to secure over $5.8 million in extramural funding. And that's important because it engages our students in curiosity, in finding answers and solutions to problems. And it also closes the gap in knowledge in the state. We work with the Department of Health, the Department of Social Services, the Office of Rural Health, and the Office of EMS. The third area, which is service, public service, community service, our students do provide quite a bit of healthcare services through like flu vaccine clinics. We have 5 clinics, educational clinics in the School of Health Sciences, and that includes 1 educational clinic through occupational therapy, 1 through physical therapy, 1 it's a counseling through social work, and 2 dental hygiene clinics. One of them is here in Sioux Falls, in downtown Sioux Falls. We also have a Center for the Prevention of Child Maltreatment that was established via a legislative mandate, and they work closely, the staff and the director of the center work closely with our legislative body and policymakers in the state. Me personally, I'm very involved in service. I serve on several national organizations. Um, I believe that mentoring and education are the best two gifts one can give to someone or one can receive. The reason I want to join the Rotary is because if those two gifts can be put on display and can be brought to life through this body with the mentorship, the network, the camaraderie that's present, and the richness of perspective and the broadness of perspective, I think the impact will be much more greater. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your gift of service with the club, and I hope it's a wonderful experience for you. I would now like to invite our panelists and moderator to the stage. While they are making their way, I'll give them a second. Then we've got bios. We're going to get to know these folks a little bit before we learn from them. To your far right, we have Lieutenant Siebenborn, who was born and raised in Columbus, Nebraska, before moving to Canton, South Dakota around his senior year of high school. He was on the football team at the University of Sioux Falls and graduated from there with a degree in business administration with an emphasis in international business. He studied abroad at a university in San Jose, Costa Rica for a semester, and upon completion of college, he joined the Sioux Falls Police Department and has served in the following areas during his 17-year career. Patrol, school resource officer at Whittier Middle School, parole sergeant, school resource officer sergeant, patrol lieutenant, and he currently serves as the lieutenant in charge of support services, which includes traffic, canine, parks, and traffic investigators. Did I get all that? He also has served as part of the police department's SWAT team for over 10 years and is currently the commander of that team. Lieutenant Siebenborn would also like you to know that even with his incredibly bad looks, he has an incredibly beautiful wife, inside and out, Andrea. And she is a sixth grade science teacher at Whittier Middle School. They recently grew their family through adoption in the past 2 years. They have a 23-month-old daughter, Malia, and they just finalized the adoption of their second daughter, Maya, this past month, and she is 7 months old. You have a busy home. What a fun holiday you're going to have. Thank you for being here. Oh, there's more. In his free time, when he's not changing diapers or reading books to his kids, he and his wife love to travel. They love to give back to the Sioux Falls community. They volunteer, and they're active advocates for those from diverse backgrounds who have difficult financial circumstances, both with their jobs or in their personal lives. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Sarah Hanson. She is currently the Managing Director of Children, Youth, and Families for Volunteers of America, Dakotas, where, among other things, she oversees after-school programming and helped launch Camp Postcard, a free week-long summer camp that brings together local law enforcement with middle school youth facing challenging circumstances. She is an active member of Sioux Falls' Youth Development Collaborative, working to connect middle and high school youth to education, career opportunities, resources, and programming. Sarah moved to Sioux Falls in 2008 to attend Augustana University, where she graduated with a degree in English and journalism. She lives with her husband, and in her free time, she can be found at the Dog Park or at the Iceplex coaching for the Sioux Falls Figure Skating Club. Brian Mulder, Downtown Rotarian, thank you for bringing this talent to our stage, and I will turn it over to you.
Well, thanks. Thanks, Cindy. Glad to be here today. Welcome to you both. And thank you for agreeing to share the story that we have to talk about today. We're here to talk about proactive policing and engaging community youth through some programs and opportunities, specifically what you'll learn about Camp Postcard. And we prepared a little bit last week to have this discussion. And I said, well, it's apropos that we're having the discussion today, as 2 weeks ago on a Monday morning, I think we all woke up to news where the Sioux Falls Police, which Officer Siebenborn was involved in that case, where they had announced an arrest of 3 18-year-olds for a homicide committed in our community. And you're seeing a lot of that, well, not homicide specifically, but you're seeing that age group with more and more rising crime. And to kind of set the tone for you, I did reach out to Mayor Paul Tenhaken and asked his thoughts on it, because I've been in community meetings where he's shared one of the major obstacles we have in our community is rising crime with our youth. And he shared this for us today. He said, unfortunately, one of the fastest growing elements of crime in our community is with our youth, and also what I call emerging adults. Those people who are 18 to 25, while legally considered adults, they're still developing mentally and societally. To address these challenges requires multifaceted approaches that take a long view approach. Mentorship, constructive out-of-school time programming, strong educational opportunities, equitable access to sports and recreation programs, strong community policy programs, school resource office connections, smart but effective juvenile justice reforms, and more. So that was from Mayor Paul Tenhaken. And to kind of share with the audience to set the tone a little bit about the scope of what we're talking about here, I also received some information from Officer Lee Person with the Sioux Falls Police Department, where he tracks and data, and he shared with me the juvenile arrest numbers for several years here. He shared with me misdemeanors, the civil runaways, but what's really staggering here in this information is felony arrests. And this information goes back a little ways, but from 2017 to 2020, the numbers are about the same. You're seeing just over 275 felony arrests for juveniles every year. In 2021, you see that tick up to 316 felony arrests for the entire year of 2021 for juveniles. But this year, January 1st through end of month November, in our community, we've had 435 juvenile arrests for felonies in our community here in Sioux Falls. So, Officer Siebenborn, you've been around for a while. We heard your bio, and you've been involved in a lot of departments in the Sioux Falls Police. What's going on out there? What are you seeing?
Yeah, I think I think the stats are the stats. I can tell you from my experience within the last 4 to 5 years, handguns, firearms have become more prevalent, not necessarily more prevalent in our community, but more prevalent in regard to crime. And when I first started, I can't even really give you really good examples of pulling guns off young men and young women, throughout the course of the day. Now I can't give you those examples because I'm a lieutenant and I sit behind the desk. But the officers that are able to would tell you it's a pretty routine thing to locate juveniles illegally in possession of a firearm or having committed a crime with said firearm. And so while the numbers through those years referenced, the years that they didn't go up, I can tell you, even though they probably stayed roughly the same, the level of violence that's being perpetuated at times through some of the youth in our community is growing. And then we use that term youth, and I do like the mayor's term, emerging adults, because it's that 14-year-old to 22, 23-year-old range that is really keeping us significantly busy. And then he referenced last week, it was 3 18-year-old males that we brought into custody for a homicide of a local Sioux Falls resident, which I just want to add was an incredible win to bring a little bit of a resolution to that case for that family, because it was a very difficult case. And Sioux Falls is certainly a safer place knowing that we got those subjects off of the street. But there's a lot to still be determined in regard to that case. But I've had a passion for youth and seeing the way it's going. I'm glad the doctor referenced mentoring. And I'm sure you've heard Chief Toom really hammer on mentoring. And what we're going to talk about today as far as Camp Post Guard is something we're really invested in as a police department, to make sure that we're not just talking about mentoring, but we're really putting our money where our mouth is as a law enforcement agency in this city, to contribute to the betterment of our youth and hopefully make us less busy and our community safer.
Yeah, thanks for that. Well, Sarah, Volunteers America Dakotas, many people probably in the room have heard about it. I don't know how many know all the work that we're involved in. Sarah and I are colleagues, as I also work at Volunteers America Dakotas. But why don't you go ahead and share a little bit about who we are and the Ministry of Service here in Sioux Falls, and then specifically what you're involved in as both the mayor and we've heard others mention, that we need those strong out of school time programs. And so just share how VOA is involved in that as well, in the role you play.
Yeah, thank you. Volunteers of America Dakotas has been involved with serving youth in one way or the other since we started. Child care was one of the first services that we started in Sioux Falls over 100 years ago, and serving youth has continued to be part of what we do. Today, we're really active in the after school space, and as Ten Hank had mentioned, that's a critical piece of this conversation about youth crime. There are statistics that show, while you might think it's kind of that late evening, it is that 3 to 6 space where kids are unsupervised that tends to be the highest for juvenile crime. So having activities for them to engage in those time periods are critically important, and VOA definitely does that with our after school programming that we currently operate in 4 Title I elementary schools in Sioux Falls. A few years ago, started a conversation about what more can we do, what else can we do, and that's how Camp Postcard was born. And I know that Siebenborn, it has even a longer history with Camp Postcard than I do, so we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, thanks. So yeah, there's a reason why the two of you are on stage together, the Sioux Falls Police Department and Volunteers of America Dakota, is because it is this camp that we keep on mentioning, Camp Postcard. And I know Cindy sent the information out this morning, but it is an acronym. So Sarah, why don't you go ahead and share that, and then a little bit about how it started nationally.
Yeah.
First, yeah.
So Camp Postcard stands for Peace Officers Striving to Create and Reinforce Dreams. It's a little bit long, but it is basically, it's essentially that. It's helping these kids who are maybe on the cusp before they get to the point where there's kind of no return, helping them see, like, you can have a different future. Some of the kids that we serve, when they're in elementary school even, they're saying, well, school doesn't really matter. I'm going to be in juvie anyway. You know, there are 4th and 5th graders that are saying that. So it's stepping in and helping them see, like, it doesn't have to be like that. That's where that creating and reinforcing dreams really comes from. Volunteers of America Dakotas, we're one of 30-some national affiliates. So there are Volunteers of America all over the country. And Camp Postcard was started by an affiliate out in Maine about 30 years ago in coordination with the Maine Sheriff's Association. And it really started from their police officer partners, from their law enforcement partners who were really active in DARE and running those DARE programs in middle schools, and said, we want to do something more. We don't want to just come in and see these kids for 3-4 weeks a year and run this DARE program. We want to do something more. And that's where the idea of Camp Postcard came from.
Yeah. And so made its way to South Dakota. I think Officer Siebenborn has more history than anybody with Camp Postcard. And so why don't you share your first introduction and kind of how it got started? And this started maybe even pre-COVID, which...
Yeah, it's a little bit pre-COVID. VOA of the Western Dakotas actually was running a Camp Postcard out there. And I caught wind through an employee of the VOA about this program, and he basically just told me, hey, if I get you out there, you're going to want to do it. So we, the department authorized one of our school resource officers to go out there for the full week, Adam Healy, and he's been super great to getting this rolled out. And then I went out for a couple days as well and saw it in action, and just saw the interaction of the young men and women with the officers out there, and just knew, left there just immediately knowing, like, we've got to get this done. We've got to get this done in the Sioux Falls area. It's going to be of great benefit. Got in the initial stages of the discussion and getting the program off of the ground. You know, I remember pitching this to Chief Burns at the time, and you know, it's a tough sell going into the chief's office saying, hey, you know, I want to see if we can't get authorized a bunch of police officers to go to a summer camp. But he believed in the vision, and since then, obviously, Chief Toom has been a big supporter of it. But we got looking like we were going to head the right direction. Then COVID stopped, and honestly just put us in the world, and stopped us in its tracks. And I think it's just credit to VOA and to all the other parties involved to really not letting the program die with COVID, and, you know, moving assets or just different things, you know, going other ways, and picking up and saying, hey, we still believe in Camp Postcard. We need to get it off the ground. And it was just awesome to see it get off the ground last year and get it rolled out. And we're confident that we're going to be able to scale it to even bigger and better things this year.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about that process. So again, the idea here is we have a camp where police officers are the counselors. You're bringing kids, and we're going to talk about how you select those kids from our community here in a second, but you're bringing them normally who would not have the opportunity to go to summer camp and give them an opportunity to summer camp. And so we have these two partners, Sioux Falls Police, Volunteers America Dakotas. So Sarah, a lot of this logistics falls on you and your department. So can you speak a little bit about, what it took to select a location, time, to kind of get this going for our first camp this past summer?
Yeah, absolutely. We absolutely benefited from the fact that we're one of many affiliates doing this at this point. Maine started it, it jumped to Colorado, Western South Dakota, Wyoming is doing it. And so working with and tapping into those resources who had done it before and really trying to say, let's not recreate the wheel and let's kind of build on the programming that has worked in other areas. But then also being really conscious of Sioux Falls is not Rapid City. Sioux Falls is not Maine. Sioux Falls is not Denver. And our kids have different needs. And so taking that structure and working really closely with Officer Healy and Lieutenant Siebenborn, who had been to a camp and had seen it done before, to say, what works? What do we need to do differently for Sioux Falls? To be honest, one of the most difficult pieces was finding a location. We want the kids going to this camp to have those summer camp opportunities. We want them to be able to go kayaking, and we want them to be able to go fishing, because honestly, it's probably the first time a lot of these kids have really, in a meaningful way, left Sioux Falls. Their worlds are so small, and part of helping them see that their future can be different is exposing them to different activities and exposing them to different people. And so finding a camp that was able to say, yeah, sure, we'll give up a week of revenue for you guys to have this camp, was really important, because their main source of revenue is getting their own campers in and running their own programming. And we were really, really fortunate to work with Lutherans Outdoors, who said, yep, we have a week that will work for you guys at Nisodak, their camp up in northeastern South Dakota, and really had everything that we needed.
Great, thanks. And so you had a location, you had a time. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think even what really worked out with this is another partnership is that for the camp, you served as their training, right, for summer staff?
Yeah, so the reason we were actually able to find a week is because they said that first week of June is when we're training our staff. So it was a good partnership that they were kind of able to work out the kinks in their summer schedule. It also worked really well for us to do that at the beginning of the summer, before we'd lost too much contact with those kids. As you get into summer and they move and it's hard to reach back out to them. And so being right after school ended, and I can't thank the school resource officers enough who helped us in that communication as they're seeing those kids every single day. I think it would be a whole different story if we were trying to reach out to these kids in the middle of the summer, because their lives really are so unstable sometimes that where they were the last week of school is not where they're going to be the middle of summer.
Yeah, so let's talk about that a little bit and talk about selecting kids. So again, the reason we're having this conversation is to proactively engage kids, right, at this inflection point of their life where they have an opportunity to make a good choice or walk down a road that leads to negative consequences. And that really fell on the school resource officers and Officer Siebenborn and his team. So you want to talk about how you went about recruiting kids to go on this camp?
I think stats will tell you that the middle school age range is the age range, or at least as far as law enforcement involvement, that you can still really have a direction of impact on them. Unfortunately, some of them that are already down that path in high school, it's tough to get them back. I mean, we still need to do a lot of things to reach out to them, but that's why we wanted to focus on this younger demographic of sixth graders going into to be seventh graders. So our school resource officers teamed up with the admin of their respective schools along with their counseling staff, and really came up with a list of students from each school that they thought would benefit from camp. And I think the important thing to remember about camp is it really covers a gamut of type of kids. I mean, we did have the kids who were like, they're at that crux. Either they're going to see Lieutenant Siebenborn and his team a lot, or maybe we can get them on this path. There's other kids who went through no fault of their own. They're just in a tough life circumstances, and there's not a ton that they have control about. And in the others, there was a small group where like maybe this is just a really good kid and their family's doing really well, and they just don't have the means that they would ever get to experience something like that, because you can't have it just be all one and just all the other. So the SROs did a really good job of identifying those kids, making contacts with the parents. Keep in mind, we're dealing with different nationalities, different cultures. The concept of summer camp sometimes doesn't make sense to some of those folks. So they're using language line and other community partners to try to explain, like, hey, we're hoping to take your kid to a summer camp for a month. So there was so much legwork done on their end as far as that one, that they're really a mission integral part to getting this off the ground. And then a lot of them also served as the camp counselors. And when we say served as the camp counselors, like, we're in the bunks with them. We're a week into, like, they said they showered, but we're not really checking type of things. So thank goodness the weather wasn't super hot. I mean, we did have windows open and air conditioners, but it got by Friday it was a little ripe in some of those bunkhouses. So like I said, we're in the thick of it with them. Sometimes I think swimming maybe was the shower for some, but no, it was fun and just awesome experience all the way around from camper. And I think if you talk to the counselors, they'd tell you that they probably benefit just as much as the campers as well.
So we're going to talk about that a little bit more, because you did. So again, a concept, we haven't done it here before, had a secure location. You got to get kids involved, but you had to get the Sioux Falls Police involved as well. So I know you also had to recruit officers. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, some of the SROs is kind of, that was a little bit easier. So and it actually wasn't as tough of a sell as I thought it was going to be. I mean, I just, I flock shot an email out, said, hey, this is what we're looking at doing. And fortunately, we're very lucky that we've got a lot of men and women that believe in this mission and believe in that type of thing. So I got just probably right at the number of people that I needed to get camp off the ground. And the Minnehaha County Sheriff's Office also provided a deputy as well, because we had a group come from the areas that's served by the Sheriff's Department. But one of the things I knew is if I could just get that first group out there, like getting counselors to come back out there was not going to be a problem, because I'm going to have that many more advocates. And going into this year, as we expect to grow camp eventually, and we committed more officers to it, like I had no problems getting those spots filled. So I don't want to say I was surprised, because our men and women of our department, I'm never surprised, because they're always, what needs to be done, and they'll step up and do it. But I was a little surprised that it was that easy, just that many people were willing, because a lot of them had camp experience themselves, or some of them come from being counselors themselves as well at a camp, and they had a great time. And this was just another way for them to kind of light that fire under themselves as well.
Yeah. Thanks. So, Sarah, why don't you set the scope for us a little bit here? How we're talking kids, we're talking officers, the numbers for both, and kind of how that fluctuated, and some of the obstacles then you had to consider as you approach camp.
Yeah, absolutely. We started out with kind of an upper limit, saying that we'd hope to serve 50 kids, and we graciously had enough officers to do that. We ended up the week of camp with about 35 kids. We kind of underestimated how difficult it was going to be to make some of those contacts. How many, like I said before, the instability means that we talked to them the last week of school and they were still on board, and then that bus left and their phone's disconnected and no one's answering the door, and we can't get them. So definitely one of the things we learned is you have to kind of over enroll for the number of kids, because you will just unfortunately have some dropouts. It ended up being a really, really good number though. Really, really low counselor to camper ratio of about 1 to 4, which is what we will always stick with. Part of that is just the bunk size and making sure that for everyone's protection, you have 2 adults in the cabin with those kids. That's kind of how it works out. But this also isn't the camp that a lot of you probably brought your kids to. This isn't the sunshine and rainbows and everything is good camp. Like Siebenborn said, we had a lot of really, really good kids there, and really, really good kids who are away from home for the first time for a week can still have challenges. And then we have some kiddos that were invited because maybe they were on that crux. And so having that low ratio really, really was incredibly important just for everyone's safety. But more importantly, some of the relationships that got to be built that way are hands down the most important part of Camp Postcard.
Yeah, but to hammer home that reality of what it's like, again, we all probably have a picture of what summer camp is like, or we've been blessed to either attend as a child or we're sending our kids now. Not quite the same experience. I know that, again, when we prepared last week, I kind of asked, well, you arrived at camp and what happened? And I think Officer Siebenborn had a great response to that. So
yeah, I mean, you arrive at camp, and some of the things that are going to be challenges that you don't think about as you're at a, like I said, Camp Neesodak, if you've never been in a beautiful camp, great area. Like nighttime was too quiet for these kids. A lot of them come from places where nighttime's a lot of chaos, and like they struggled with the stillness and trying to go to sleep when there's not, unfortunately, an argument in the background or just other things moving and shaking in the house. What we thought was a reasonable time to go to bed wasn't necessarily a reasonable time to go to bed because a lot of them are used to staying up at all hours. But no, we had a lot of challenges, a lot of behavior challenges. You just have some kids with some behaviors, and at the end of the day, we want to make sure that everyone at camp is safe. We did, in ensuring that everyone is safe. One of the things that we didn't really discuss, at great length ahead of time is what happens if someone needs to be sent home, and we did have to end up sending two kids home from camp. But I think Sarah has got you never know what's going to happen when you call mom or dad and say, hey, we've got to send your kid home from camp. So Sarah was kind of the hired gun per se in that realm. I'm like, the last person you want to say, and your son and daughter's out of camp is the police. Like, do not. But Sarah can speak more to that, because I'm like, oh man, that's going to be a really tough phone call. I'm so glad she gets to do that, and not me. But I don't think it was quite as bad as I think any of us were expecting.
Yeah, there were actually some wins in having to take the two kids home that we did. One mother in particular, when we brought the kid home and met the mom and kind of explained to her what had happened and why, she said, this is actually probably a really good thing. I know that I'm not as hard on him as I need to be, and this might be the first time he's had a real solid consequence in a long time, and this needed to happen. And then certainly, one of the kids that we did have to bring home at our first reunion event, he came and his family came and visited with the officers. So certainly not those negative relationships. It was and the drive home is an opportunity to talk to the kiddos about the choices they made and why they're experiencing this consequence, and they get it.
Yeah. So we talked about asking what surprised you about the kids. Share some of what you, again, Officer Siebenborn kind of mentioned you were unprepared for the quiet of the night, but I think there was a few other stories that you shared the other day. Can you share some of those?
I think before we even got to camp, some of the things that surprised me as we were visiting with the school resource officers about who they were referring and why they were referring kids. I expected I'm inviting this kid because he is a good kid, but he's hanging out with the wrong crowd, so I want him to meet some new kids. Like, I expected that. What I didn't expect was how many kids the school resource officers referred and said, well, I don't think this kid is going to have a place to sleep at night, and going to camp, he'll at least have a place to sleep at night. Or I don't think this kid is going to have meals every day, but camp will at least be a place that he can go and have meals every day. That was shocking to me.
Yeah, I remember in the line, one of the kids asked me, he's like, hey, do we get 3 meals a day? And I was like, yeah. He's like, I've never had 3 meals a day. And you're like, ooh, that hits it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely puts it in perspective in those types of things. So kids were there. It wasn't sunshine and rainbows at first. Yeah, had a couple incidences. It drove some kids home, but kind of the week progressed. When did you see the kids kind of transition and fall into the routine? And how did you see a change from day one towards the end of the week?
I think once you kind of got midway through the week is kind of when we really started to see the change. We had gotten through a little bit of just the uneasiness and some of the kids trying to fill you out as counselors and staff as far as what's going to be allowed and not allowed. And then it's just like they really forgot about who you were and what your background is. I can tell you almost like every day they ask me like, hey, what do you do? And I was like, I'm a police officer, just like I told you yesterday. So you could really see those boundaries being broke down between not just us as law enforcement and the kids there as well, but VOA staff is integrated with them, and some of these kids have had challenges with just being respectful of other adults. So like I said, you got about halfway through, and you really saw like, man, they're they're starting to get it. They're starting to hold each other accountable, where we're not, don't have that piece of accountability, where that we're needing to reach out to them. One of the campers is maybe, getting them lined up instead of us telling them that, to get their line better type of deal. And then, and then by the end, I don't think you really could have seen too much difference between this summer camp and really what maybe some of us would expect a summer camp to look like.
Yeah, I know. Well, one of the events at this summer camp would be much different than what we've all experienced. Can you share a little bit about what was called Demo Day and what that was like for the Sioux Falls Police?
Yeah, one of the unique things that Camp Postcard does, and a lot of the other Camp Postcards across the country do, is called Demo Day. Part of what we're trying to do, obviously, is help these youth kind of understand more what it is that law enforcement does. And we saw a lot of kids say, I just kind of thought they were bad guys. Like, I didn't realize how much they did to help the community. And part of us helping get these kids there was Demo Day. So we brought in demonstrations from different law enforcement. Siebenborn did one and kind of talked about his work on the SWAT team and some other stuff. We had Highway Patrol with the rollover vehicle. We had a drug dog, a narcotics dog in, and had those demonstrations for the kids. And that was really, really impactful for those kids to kind of learn more. We left with some kids saying, like, I didn't know I could do that and be a police officer. And they never would have considered a career in law enforcement before. And now that's something that they have as a goal. And the way that they will change their trajectory and change the decisions they make, I don't think you can underestimate the impact of that and the power of that.
Anything more to add? Yeah.
No, I agree. We had game fish and parks there. Even those outside of law enforcement, whether it's these kids or adults, there's just so many avenues that you can go and have a career in, depending on what your interests are. So it was really, really nice just to explain to those and show the young men and women what avenues are out there as far as law enforcement and opportunity within that particular career path.
Yeah. So 1 week camp, you saw a change in students, but the goal isn't just 1 week and then you lose touch. How are we connecting with these kids year long? How do you extend that experience? And I know you mentioned the reunion event, but go ahead and share a little bit more what that looks like.
Yeah, I'll tell you one of the things that I think that makes this particular camp different than what I know about some other camps where law enforcement is involved across the country, is that this isn't just a week at camp and we're done, have a great summer. Well, I think one of the best components of this camp is that it's ongoing after you get back from camp. VOA has it set up where we then meet with those involved with camp every quarter, so that we can continue to have those relationships with the students that were there and continue to try to expound on them. So that way, there's a lot of these kids, they have people coming in their lives and then they leave just as quick. And we don't want to be a part of that circle. So like I said, that's one of the best components about the way this camp is run, as compared to others, is that ongoing mentorship, that ongoing relationship component. Earlier this fall, we met at Central Church and did rock climbing with them at their rock climbing wall and had a pizza party there, and watching even the kids there who were maybe a little bit timid to try climbing a rock wall, and having their counselors there that had a relationship with them encourage them and support them and say, like, hey, if you do it, I will do it. And then seeing them get that courage and just seeing the excitement of these kids, even the ones I was like, man, I bet you that kid hated you as a camp counselor, like come into that event. And they're like, where's so-and-so? And they're like giving them the biggest hug ever. Like, it's awesome. And then we've got a roller skating one coming up. I haven't told the chief about that. We'll probably half of us will be on workman's comp with broken ankles and stuff like that, myself included. But like I said, that's one of the tenets about this camp, is to make sure we've got that ongoing component about relationships, and letting them know that, hey, you've got some other people in your corner if you need the support.
Yeah, just to expand on that, so certainly the reunion events are a really important piece of that, but there's built-in follow-up just by the nature of us having such heavy involvement from the middle school SROs. And one thing that I didn't expect that has been really, really cool in talking with the school resource officers this year is kids who have bounced from one school to the other. They go to their new school and they're like, hey, you were at Camp Postcard. And they have that face, their school resource officer at their new school that they can trust and they're not afraid to go to. And that's really important.
So we're going to get into data and outcomes here in a second, but the word trust. You just said
Mhm.
trust. And Officer Siebenborn, you were sharing a story of an interaction that took place this summer. Why don't you go ahead?
Yeah.
Because I think it expounds the trust that was built.
Yeah, I think it's
Yeah.
anytime you run, an event, anytime, our department's investing in an event, anytime VOA is investing in an event, or the people who donate, who help this camp go on, like, they want to see some data. They want to know some things like, how do we know this is working? How do I know my dollars are getting used right? How do I tell the chief, like, hey, paying these salaries at camp, covering all this overtime with the people who left their jobs, how do you know that it works? Now, Sarah's going to be able to get into the nitty gritty as far as like some actual data on that. All I've got is my word and the stories and the stories that have been told to me by other officers. So I'll use one example that really just speaks to me. There was Matt Vandervelde. He was our SRO at Axel Park School, which it's an alternative school, and just by nature that school has a lot of the kids with challenging behaviors. And he had this one young man that he brought to camp, and man, like he was a challenge. Holy smokes! Like he made it through camp, which was awesome, because I would bet on day one that most of us were like, no way that this young man makes it through camp. But Matt and others got him through camp, and he was a really good young man at camp. But he really came from, talking to Officer Vandervelde, he really came from just really difficult circumstances. And Officer Vandervelde grabbed me later this summer. He's like, hey, you're not going to believe this. I'm like, what? He's like, our school resource officers go back and they work normal or other details during the summer when they're not in the school. And Officer Vandervelde worked the night shift. He's like, hey, I was at the get and go at 14th and Min. It was like 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning. We were dealing with like the post downtown bar crowd that congregates there and sometimes makes bad decisions. And he's like, we were knees deep dealing with this incident. He goes, and all of a sudden out of left field, I hear, hey, Matt, what are you doing? He goes, I look over and I see this kid from Camp Postcard. He's shirtless. He doesn't have any shoes on, but he knew Matt from Camp Postcard, and he knew to holler at him or whatever to say what's up. So Matt got done dealing with this, and he went over to this kid, and he's just like, what the heck is going on? Like, I know where you live. It's nowhere close to here. Your family's not with you. Like, you're shirtless and you have no shoes on. So he ended up getting him to where he needed to go. But I don't think that interaction happens. Actually, I can tell you for certain that interaction doesn't happen if they hadn't had that relationship, from before. And he knew about this student, through his time at that Axtel. But it wasn't to the degree of them being kind of hand in hand through camp that I think really made this kid feeling like, hey, I've got an ally in Officer Vandervelde that I know that I can holler out to him at 2:30 in the morning. And that, like I said, that's some of the backgrounds of some of these kids that we all have know, that exists. And I don't want to say on a regular basis, but it's out there in our community. And just for him to have the courage to reach out to Matt and holler at him, and then Matt to know this young man and not look the other way and get him squared away. It's just, like I said, I heard that story and I just started giggling a little bit, because I can picture this kid, and I can picture all the guff he gave Officer Vandervelde a little bit throughout camp. And so yeah, it was just a great interaction. And I've got other interactions I can tell you about. Just even my wife, being a teacher at Whittier Middle School, kids coming up to her like, hey, I went to Camp Postcard. This is what it taught me. This is what it is, and I remember this from this, and yada yada yada. So like you said, that's what I bring to the table. Sarah will be able to they do a little bit more as far as like actual data tracking and some stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, a very wise woman named Cindy once said, nonprofits tend to lean heart while the community tends to lean head. So I'm going to balance those two here because it is important. You've heard a lot of heart in these anecdotal stories, but it is important. Are we actually making a difference? And so from the start, we wanted to make sure that we were evaluating this program to see if it was making it a difference. So before camp and after camp, we did a survey of parents and kids and asked them to kind of just rate how much they agreed with statements like, the police are there to help and protect me. I would go to the police if I needed help, and kind of did those pre and post surveys. And what we saw was just in that week, pre and post, 75% of kids improved their trust with law enforcement. I think what's even cooler is when we redid those surveys 3 months out, it was still at 70%.
well. And I mean, honestly, I appreciate our department's stance on this, because at the end of the day, we're talking about, violence and youth and stuff like that. And so everywhere we put a body, we've got to be able to justify that. And quite frankly, at the end of the day, that's 20 bodies that we don't have doing something here in the city, to, potentially provide service. To put into play. We want to make sure that's well spoken for every officer that we put into play out there, whether it's through this detail, or, going to summer camp. We've got to be able to speak to that and answer to the community about why that's a good investment for our police officers. And we have no problem standing behind this camp. I would tell you from a professional development end, not only with the campers, but going full circle and kind of going back to what the doctor said, to say, like, mentorship's a two-way street. And our officers are better officers from coming back from this camp. It's not just us giving to them, making those campers better. Those campers make us better as law enforcement officers and give us additional tools and abilities to assist youth more on calls in the future. So we benefit from them just as much as I hope they benefit from it from us.
Okay. So one last question for me, and then we'll sneak a question or two from the audience. We just mentioned investment from the city, obviously paying officers. We have the support of the mayor, the support of the chief, but there's other investments. Sarah, how is it getting done on the BOA side to cover camp costs? I think it's important. You said something about kids don't need to pay and they don't. Go ahead and explain that.
No, that's thank you, Brian. This is completely free, no cost to the kids who attend. And I think that is critical because the population that we're targeting, very, very few of them would be able to attend if they had to pay. We also have kids who show up and they have the clothes that they're wearing, and that's what they bring to camp. So we also knew it was important that their sleeping bags and their pillows and their towels and their hygiene and their extra clothes, we knew we need to have that on hand. So we made it really easy for kids to attend at no cost, and that it's at no cost to the family, but there obviously is a cost to that.
So we had some great partnerships, obviously from private donors, but Shields stepped up as well, and
Shields donated all the supplies and sleeping bags. So
great. Questions from the audience at all? Nope, we got a few of them. Jen's checking her email, but also running the mic.
Had a good news email. You got to
good. Yeah.
Thanks for the information. Are there girls involved in the camp? And then could you just run down like what a typical day is like, the combination of education and recreation?
Yeah, there are. So it's there's boys and girls that are invited to camp. One of the challenges with females is obviously law enforcement, being the counselors were a little bit low in females. So maybe not as many as we got to be able to go last year. However, this year I specifically reached out to the female demographic within our agency and was like, hey, I need this many, and go recruit your friends as well. And they certainly stepped up to the table, so we would be able to handle just about any number of each. And I'll let Sarah speak a little bit just as far as what a normal day kind of looked like for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So normal day, get up, the kids are hopefully showering, maybe. Breakfast, cleaning cabins was a really important one. We wanted to build that responsibility and that sense of ownership. So we had a clean cabin contest. And so right after breakfast, some of the kids got really, really, really into cleaning the cabins. Like they're, scrubbing the floors with little pledge wipes. So that was a big one. And then typically our mornings were built around those kind of active social emotional learning. So like the team building activities, like, the trolley walkers where they have to learn to kind of walk in sync, or those kind of active activities where they think they're just having fun and doing things, but they're really building things like, how do I communicate? How do I problem solve? How do I work as a team? And we break for lunch, typically have a little bit of downtime, quiet time, that important time to decompress. And then the afternoons looked a little bit more like a typical summer camp was. That's when our waterfront was open and they could swim or get in the boats or fish or whatever. And then after summer, after supper, then we would do a little bit more of a debrief. One of the things that we did is the whole camp is structured around the Code of the West. It's these 10 principles based on a book, The Code of the West, where we're talking to kids about things like living each day with courage, doing what has to be done, and kind of just reconnecting with those kids about what we did today, reinforcing those principles with the hopes that they then take those onto their life. And then, maybe a little bit more free time, depending on how good they were that day before we get them off to bed.
One of the best parts, real quick, is, of course, you're at camp, you got to have a camp tug of war challenge. And watching the girls' cabin just destroy all the boys' cabins was worth the price of admission in and of itself, because there's nothing like watching a bunch of very full of themselves 6th to 7th grade males get destroyed by the young ladies, and it was cool to watch. So.
Thanks again for the presentation. Lauren Boyens, I'm a visitor. Anyway, any issues as campers came with weapons? Curious about that. And then you told us about the first 2-3 days were maybe the most challenging, and after that, why folks fell in line. So can we, as a takeaway, assume or learn that maybe good behavior is pretty easily arrived at, given the guidance and direction that is necessary?
Yeah, one of the things with camp is, before they're allowed on the bus, they search all their belongings and stuff like that, not necessarily just for weapons or anything like that, but just with making sure no one's got whatever cigarettes or vaping pens or other things you just shouldn't belong. So we're very confident with that, because that all happened before, and we didn't find anything that shouldn't be there. And then as far as the change, I think after that kind of feeling out period of camp a little bit with the counselors and the staff and the kids, I think there was a level of trust, but also a level of respect that occurred between both groups. And then with that being said, with that trust and with that respect, simple requests became easier, and they just kind of knew what was expected to them. At the end of the day, young men and women want to be held accountable. They want expectations. We are doing them no favors by not having high expectations for them, by not holding them accountable. And this was just really, for me, just proof positive that these kids thrive with expectations. Some of them have never, it was just this is, my family's history. We come from this. Dad's in prison, brother's in prison. I'm expected to go to prison. There's never been an expectation that, no, you're going to change the world. And that's, just in a handful of watching those young men and women thrive on expectation and thrive on trust and respect. I think just with a little bit of guidance, a little bit of mentorship, and just seeing it in action and seeing that modeled for them, on a 24/7 window for a week, really gave them some tools that they might not be able to do or to have.
One thing that I will add on to that, in answer to your question, is when we kind of talk about trauma, and I think there was probably not a single kid at camp that hadn't experienced some trauma. And as you're talking about youth crime, there's probably not a lot of these kiddos that are being arrested that don't have some kind of trauma. It can feel like this big thing, and how do we tackle that? But really, one of the key resilience factors, one of the biggest things you can do to help change the trajectory and help them not go that pathway that trauma can sometimes cause, is as simple as, do they have one adult in their life who they can trust and go to? I mean, that simple thing does make a difference in the trajectory. And so part of it is building that at camp. Part of that is through this mentorship. It really does make a difference in behaviors.
Well, thank you both for your time. Thank you, audience. I know we've gone over time a little bit.
You really opened a lens and a door that maybe not all of us in this room experience day to day. Thank you for the work that you do, particularly the story of Camp Postcard and all the things to continue. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Again, next week we will have our holiday party, and I hope to see all of you there. With that, Rotary is adjourned.